ridiculous.
Ridiculous, but I bet it was for a significant amount of money.
Still ridiculous.
Yeah, but fun. I'd watch it. Look, Jake Paul wants to test himself against actual, not just world champion, but one of the greatest of all time.
Really fought, and it wasn't fixed. Jake Paul would not survive 45 seconds.
I don't know about that. I think it would take a few rounds.
Really?
But yeah. First of all, Jake is a lot bigger. Jake's a lot bigger.
But what weight would they fight?
Well,
it's not about the number. If it was about the number, we could have started up. I would have tell you, I'm not just interested. It makes no sense for me. It's not my what I'm looking at right now.
Joe Rogan was left stunned after hearing that Jake Paul had offered Francis Ngannou the chance to be his next opponent following the cancellation of his scheduled fight with Gervonta Davis. On his podcast, Rogan called the idea insane and borderline. Reckless for the YouTuber-turned-boxer Ngannou, a former UFC heavyweight champion, and one of the most terrifying punchers in combat sports, represents a danger that few dare to face. Rogan questioned whether Jake truly understood what he was getting himself into, but admitted that if the fight ever happened, it would be an unforgettable spectacle.
Nikista calls Francis. This is Francis telling the story. Nikista calls Francis and says, hey, we need your help. We need an opponent for Jake. Tank is out. And Francis says, all right. And Francis says, well, how can I help you? And Nikista says, well, we're looking at an opponent for Jake. Tank Davis is out. And Francis says, all right, but specifically, how can I help you? Nikista takes a third swing at the bat. He says, well, we need an opponent. We need a boxer. We need a partner. We need somebody to fight Jake. Tank is out. And Francis asks him again, okay, what?
When Jake Paul's highly promoted exhibition match with Gervonta Davis collapsed amid Davis's growing legal troubles, Paul and his team scrambled to find a replacement. Among the names that surfaced was none other than Francis Ngannou, the Cameroonian powerhouse who transitioned from MMA to boxing after conquering the UFC. Known for his monstrous size, unmatched strength, and knockout power, Ngannou instantly turned the conversation from a simple boxing match to a potential combat sports earthquake
saga. I think the fight is going to be completely canceled and rescheduled, and now we have potential opponent names and some people being ruled out coming into today. This is not a joke. It was said by Mike Coppinger and others that the #1 candidate to replace Tank Davis in a Jake Paul fight, probably on a different date, was going to be Francis Ngannou. What the f? But we have an update on that and other potential names that Jake could fight. Again, I think on a separate date, and why I think the Jake and Tank fight is completely off. No more, maybe, no more, we don't think it'll happen.
Michael Bisping couldn't help but point out the absurd jump in scale between Jake Paul's original opponent and the one now rumored going from Gervonta Davis, a lightweight, to Francis Ngannou, a 260-pound heavyweight, is like leaping from one end of the fighting spectrum to the other. Bisping noted that such a dramatic shift doesn't just change the fight, it completely redefines the challenge. The mismatch isn't just about skill or record, it's about raw power reach and the sheer legitimacy of threat.
Like Mike Tyson, who's 58, Anderson Silva, who was way past his prime, people like Nate Diaz, who were way smaller. Gervonta Davis really did take the piss. I mean, that was just the craziest shout ever. To go from fighting Gervonta Davis, way smaller, to now fighting boxing Francis Ngannou. I mean, listen, if he does it, fair play. But I just call #1 bullshit on this brother, because I don't see this happening. No.
This is #1 bullshit.
I just don't believe it. I don't believe it at all. Nate Diaz, yeah, 100%. I mean, he beat him once already. I'm sure Nate Diaz would love to get another big payday, because obviously boxing on Netflix and going up against Jake Paul, given his success, given the name that he has, and given the magnitude of his events, Nate Diaz will get paid an absolute fortune once again. We know that it wasn't too long ago, Jake Paul was talking about boxing Anthony Joshua. And that never came to fruition. There's absolutely no way he would box Anthony Joshua. If he did, if he was to do something like that, whether it be Anthony Joshua or Francis Ngannou, I'd give him his props. I'd give him his credit. And you never know. Maybe he would do it just for the clout, because in many ways it would be, sorry about the airport notifications, it would be, an admirable thing to do. And it would be Jake Paul taking on somebody bigger.
According to Ngannou himself, Jake Paul's team reached out unexpectedly about stepping in as a late replacement. The proposal, Ngannou said, felt abrupt and misaligned with his professional goals. Though money was discussed, he ultimately turned it down, insisting the offer didn't make sense. He questioned how anyone could see replacing Davis with him as logical. "This isn't about a payday," Ngannou said firmly. "It's about making a fight that makes professional sense."
To fight Jake to replace Gervonta, I'm like, who's Jake? I was so confused, I wasn't expecting that at all. And he said, yeah, Jake Paul, he's fighting. And I'm like, no, bro, come on. Don't disrespect me like that. And then they even say, they even come out after and say, and what if the number are good? He sent out some number. I'm like, it's not about the number. If it was about the number, we could have started up. I would have tell you, I'm not just interested. He make no sense for me. It's not my
Former UFC champion Daniel Cormier didn't hold back when reacting to the news. He issued a stark warning to Jake Paul, reminding him that stepping into the ring with Francis Ngannou isn't a marketing move. It's a potential career-ender. Cormier stressed that Ngannou's power is on another level and that Paul, despite his courage, lacks the experience and physical build to withstand such force. "This isn't about clout or spectacle," Cormier said. "The risk here far outweighs the reward."
Paul goes from fighting Gervonta Davis to calling out Francis Ngannou. Jake Paul don't want those problems. I can't say it any different. Jake Paul does not want any Francis Ngannou problems. He don't. He does not want those issues. While I think it's crazy and I credit him for doing that, and I'm surprised he did that, this could be a ploy. Him poking out his chest, saying, I want Francis. He don't want those Francis Ngannou problems. I don't care what Anthony Joshua did to Francis Ngannou. Jake Paul gets in there with Francis. Francis will knock his head off this planet. You don't want those Francis problems. I watched Francis put down Tyson Fury. Sure, Anthony Joshua beat him. But even if Jake got power, I don't think he got power to be dealing with Francis. Because all it takes is for one.
Cormier went further, questioning Jake's true motives. He suggested that Paul's interest in Ngannou was more about attention and headlines than genuine competition. He reminded fans that Ngannou's power is legendary, capable of punching through gloves and sending shockwaves through opponents even at the elite level. If Jake doesn't understand the difference between MMA striking and heavyweight boxing, Cormier warned it could be a very short night for him.
Right? Boxing is much different than mixed martial arts. The target audience might be the same, but the demographics different. The places where people are brought up are different. There's bigger entourages in boxing. It's just a different world in boxing. We've known that from the very beginning. We know that Gervonta Davis was not going to just play to Jake Paul's rules. I still don't know exactly why this thing is falling apart, but it is falling apart bad. It is bursting at the seams. We are almost exactly where we should have never started. This should have never gotten started, but it did. But we are almost now exactly where we need to be in the fight, and that's it.
Analysts across the fight world echoed the same sentiment, calling the proposal for Jake Paul to face Ngannou on short notice reckless and strategically unsound. Paul had barely begun adjusting for Gervonta Davis's lightweight speed before being asked to prepare for a heavyweight juggernaut. Ngannou, meanwhile, had no reason to accept a fight that didn't fit his career path. Many compared the potential bout to Tyson Fury's showdown with Ngannou, a spectacle that surprised the world when Fury, the reigning heavyweight king, struggled against the MMA convert. In a Paul versus Ngannou scenario, the imbalance would be even more extreme, a social media boxer against one of the most destructive athletes alive.
What I find interesting about this is, okay, if they push it back to December, then that's slightly different. But this is the kind of one situation where you're kind of 10 days out, 2 weeks out from a fight, whenever they first got wind of this problem. This is the kind of situation where it would be possible that Jake Paul and Nikita Badarian and MVP, who are very, very shrewd people, this is the one occasion where they might end up making a mistake and taking someone at short notice who they shouldn't take. Because there'd be a whole raft of people putting their hand up for it, wouldn't they? Thinking, I'll take him at short notice. I'll make out that I've been sitting on a beach eating and drinking for the last 6 months. But anything just to get in there with him, and then on the night, I'm gonna knock his head off. There'll be loads of people putting their hand up for this, and you'd have to be incredibly careful about who you took at short notice, because for it to have any kind of meaning, you would need to take a decent opponent at short notice, because obviously they're up against it because it's short notice. You couldn't take some barely warm body at short notice, because that would be even worse than giving them full notice. So this is the one area, the one situation in which it would be easy for them to make a mistake, but they don't make mistakes with things like this. They just don't. So yeah, I'm not surprised that they haven't been tempted into, somebody. Yeah, Ngannou, that'd be a mistake. It'd be such a mistake. I know he got flattened by Joshua, but so what? Joshua is a 2-time unified champion of the world, and Ngannou's 270 pounds of absolute granite. That would have been a terrible, terrible mistake if they'd given him the fight.
And he dropped, like, people. I know, my opinion, Tyson Fury won that fight with Ngannou, but he still put Tyson Fury.
He was close.
Chael Sonnen, known for his blunt analysis, shared a mix of humor and concern. From a pure sporting perspective, he said the fight makes little sense. It's not about who's better, but about how much punishment Jake can endure. Sonnen reminded audiences that even Tyson Fury, one of the most technically skilled heavyweights in history, was dropped by a single Ngannou punch. If Fury barely survived, Sonnen argued, what chance does Jake have? Thinking he can take those shots is pure fantasy.
If this says fighting Jake Paul wouldn't make sense, well, what in the hell do you think Tyson Fury got for boxing you? These aren't mean things from me. This is a reality. Tyson Fury knew there was a check. Name one person you'd rather see Jake Paul fight than Francis Ngannou. Is a real challenge. How Tyron Woodley, Ben Askren, Anderson Silva, Mike Tyson, how those aren't real challenges, I don't know. But this is the story as we're told. And do you see where that would satisfy so much? Do you see where that would force even the biggest hater to be quiet? And my job, for something to make sense, is the biggest check against the easiest opponent. I cannot think of anything I would rather see
Jake Paul has built his empire on hype spectacle and a willingness to test limits. But this time, the act may not be working. Unlike previous fights against opponents closer to his size and experience, this matchup feels off balance, and forced analysts suggest that Jake's strategy using shock value to stay relevant might finally be losing its magic. The narrative now feels less about evolution and more about desperation. Even ticket sales have reflected the skepticism remaining flat despite heavy promotion and social media buzz.
Exhibition, and he's retired. Tank still being in the competitive nature of the sport throws this one completely off for me. And the fact that Jake is like 60 pounds bigger than he is, right? Like, Mike was obviously far older than Jake, and that was the big knock on that fight. Mike should not have been in there with Jake. Said that many times. Jake has fought so hard against people saying he's bad for the sport. He's bad for the sport. He doesn't actually want to fight or step up or do any of this stuff. And I've kind of had his back when I'm like, no, he is doing what most boxers have done early in their career. But this gives those people more ammo to be like, yeah, bro, look, this is what we're talking about. When we say he's bad for the sport, or when we say that he's doing stuff that doesn't make sense and he's making a mockery of things, this is what they're talking about. And again, I wouldn't have any problem with it if Tank was way past the point where he could fight competitively at his weight class and have fights with guys like Shakur Stevens, or even, again, rematching guys like...
Sonnen later added that while Jake's confidence and risk-taking make him entertaining, facing someone like Ngannou is an entirely different game. He's not Tyson Fury, Sonnen said. He doesn't have Fury's chin frame or experience. If Fury could barely take one punch, Jake won't take even that. The statement underscored the growing consensus among experts this fight isn't brave, it's reckless.
Bludgeoning. You can't even grab a hold of the guy or try to squeeze him. You can only bludgeon and be bludgeoned back. I think you're got an uphill battle to question somebody. But they have been very effective in doing just that to Jake. Hey, you start with this NBA guy, and then even those MMA guys, they're not boxers. And then when you got around to the boxers, but they weren't current boxers. Then when you get around to the current boxers, they're not big enough boxers. And I just loved it. When I heard that Francis Ngannou might be going against Jake, I loved it. I mean, what's that going to look like? How many of those shots from Francis can you take? Tyson Fury, if you're talking clean, Tyson Fury only took one. Everything else, Tyson was able to roll with. Big Francis only had to hit him one time. That's it.
Boxing analyst Tim Bradley highlighted the ripple effects of the canceled Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis fight. Beyond the fighters, an entire ecosystem, promoters, broadcasters, sponsors, venues was affected. Millions had already been invested in marketing, logistics, and production. When Davis's legal troubles forced the event to collapse, brands distanced themselves, broadcasters withdrew, and everyone involved took financial losses. It was a sobering reminder that in modern boxing, one man's fall can drag an entire business machine down with him 12.
Let's get on Tank real quick. You gotta be the dumbest dude, in the history of boxing, bro. $40 million, dog, down the drain. You gotta be the dumbest dude I've ever seen in the history of boxing, bro. Seriously. I'm like, $40 million, bro. Wealth. Literally wealth, bro. Going down the drain. I don't understand it. I can't make the... I don't understand it. But I'll tell you this. MVP promotions, whatever the hell y'all call it, most valuable promotions, shit, more like rookie promotions. Yeah, more like rookie promotions. You didn't know what you were dealing with. You had no clue. This has always been down Tank's alley, man. Now, let me just say one thing.
Bradley noted that much of that money is likely gone for good, but the bigger lesson lies in how the sport itself operates. The proposed fight between Jake Paul and Francis Ngannou highlights just how unpredictable and commercially fragile boxing has become for Paul to even consider a heavyweight like Ngannou. His entire training philosophy would need a complete overhaul, massive strength gains, reinforced durability, altered sparring strategies, and months of adaptation. What works against? Lightweights won't save him against a 260-pound powerhouse who hits like a freight train. In the end, analysts agree, if Jake Paul truly wants this fight, he can't treat it as another influencer boxing spectacle. This would demand discipline, danger, and months of genuine preparation. Otherwise, stepping into the ring with Francis Ngannou wouldn't just be bold. It would be suicidal.
It would be something unique. It would be something incredible. It's the same reason that I would be intrigued by a Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua fight, although I would never advise Jake Paul to take a Anthony Joshua fight. I wouldn't advise him to take a Francis Ngannou fight either, because as much as Anthony is far better, which we saw when they actually fought, Joshua slept Francis Ngannou quicker than me after 2 melatonin. I mean, it was quick, fast, in a hurry, completely dominant. But we also saw Francis Ngannou go toe-to-toe with the heavyweight champion of the world at that time. Yes, he was out of shape. We understand that. But Tyson Fury on that night got the shock of his life when Francis Ngannou not only went toe-to-toe, but put him down and danced on him. To this day, I think that fight could have gone Francis's way. Point being, there are levels to this shit. Not just in boxing, but in combat in general. And the size difference Francis would have over Jake would be incredible, but it would have been a great event. And a lot of people would have tuned in. Francis, though, is saying... that's not happening.
How can they go from Gervonta Davis to Francis Ngannou? Gervonta Davis is a fantastic boxer, but and is a one-shot knockout artist. But come on, the weight different and everything. It makes no sense.
It's a good point. I mean, obviously, Francis is right about the weight difference, but it's a good point in general for what do you do next? Jake has sparred guys like Shakur Stevenson, Ray Ford, Montana Love to try to prepare for Tank Davis. And even if you book this fight on December 12th or December 19th, that's still a completely different fight than you were going into. Completely different matchup, size-wise, skill-wise, the things that you're going to need to even try to compete if it's...
That's for today. Video subscribe for more.